We all know how to recognise a speedway bike, 500 cc's, wafer slim, no brakes and no gears, like this one belonging to Bjarne Pedersen. Down here, there's really only a choice of two engines to choose from, and a handful of tuners, of course, who can make it work at its best. So what is it that a rider can do to set up an engine to win races on tracks that are a whole variety of conditions and shapes and sizes? Well, to get the answers to that, we've come here to the workshops of Chris Gibb, one of the best-known faces in the Poole pits, and of course the mechanic for Bjarne Pedersen this year. Well, Chris, I know that you're working for Bjarne this year, but of course your connections with Poole Speedway go right back to when you helped Neil Middleditch, in fact, 20 years ago in 1983. And of course since then you've helped other people, particularly Javi, of course, for 4 years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've been involved in Speedway, lucky enough to be involved for about 20 years now, and just love the sport of Speedway, you know, just can't get enough of it, really.
When it comes to bikes, we know that really, and we've just said that there's two choices, GMs and Jawas. Is it just a personal preference that gets a rider to choose from one of those two?
Yes, I think so. I think, you know, some riders, they stay on a GM or a Jawa for 3 or 4 years and they may struggle, you know, they may struggle a little bit. So, you know, it really is just a thing of, you know, having a change, you know, they might just for a season have a go with the Jawas, you know, instead of a GM. And 9 times out of 10 it seems to work for them, you know, for a little while, but I think after a while they tend to go back to what they know best, you know.
In our last feature we showed a track walk and what the riders talk about when they're looking at the track for the first time on the evening of their race. Is that the time when they're really going to start thinking about setting up the bike?
Yes, it is. You know, they'll look at the track, they'll look at the condition of the track, see if there's any grip on there or whether it's very slick, and the first change they will make is probably to open up the ignition, retard it or advance it according to the conditions of the track.
Okay, let's have a look. That's in here, yes?
Yes, it's in there.
Okay, let's open up and have a look at that. Right, we're inside the ignition box now. What are we looking at, Chris?
Okay, we're looking at our lines here, how we set the engine up on the ignition. You have a range of from about 20 degrees to 35 degrees that you can actually alter the engine. Normally, if it's a very slick track, you would put it on between 20 and 25 to get more grunt out of the thing and not spin so much. And if you turned up to a very, very grippy track, you would advance it up into about 30, 35 degrees, so it would rev really hard and get you through the dirt.
Well, Chris, that's something, of course, that is going to change not just at the start of the meeting, but we're actually going to see that being changed onward through the meeting, even as the track changes itself from race to race.
Yes, normally you would maybe make 4 or 5 changes with ignition, you know. Possibly you might take it down low because the track was getting slicker, but then by making other adjustments to the back wheel and the sprocket on the back wheel, you may tend to start putting it up again. If you put a smaller sprocket on the back for more speed, you may tend to put the ignition up to make it a little bit stronger to pull it a bit quicker.
That covers the ignition, Chris, but of course there's a balance now between the fuel and the carburetor jets and the ignition, and I guess a limitless possibility of combinations between the two.
Yes, there is. There's so many combinations, it's so hard to find the combination. The best way probably to find that combination is to make one change at a time, you know, during the meeting. Some people may change 2 or 3 things. They lose completely where they're at, you know, they've still got the problem. So what we normally do is we'll change one thing at a time, maybe try the ignition. Another thing to do is we have a main jet in here which lessens or puts more fuel into the carburetor. The bigger jet you put in, the more fuel that puts in, which actually chokes the engine, which makes it rev less, which actually gives you a bit more grunt at the start. Or you can go the other way, put a very small jet in, so it burns really quick, and it makes the engine rev a lot harder.
And again, you're still trying to find that balance, and the track changes, it can throw it out, you know, you can get it right for one race, and then the next race it's all different.
That's right, you've really got to keep on top of it all during the meeting, because the track changes so much during the meeting. You know, unless you keep on top of it, you can go out and win one race and go out on the same bike and everything that you thought was going really well, and because the track has changed, you can run a last. It is, you know, it's so important to make sure you know what you've done and obviously keep following that up.
Chris, we've talked about the things that you're going to be changing race by race, but I guess one of the things that a rider's going to know even before he gets at the track is going to be the size of his back sprocket, and the gearing obviously is crucial to a speedway bike. I know that a big sprocket indicates a very low gear. How does a rider perhaps select one for Poole versus one for, say, a small track like Oxford?
Yeah, well, normally people would know what sprocket to put on the back wheel. Whatever track they go to, they've got their little books, they know. The size of the sprocket really determines the size of the track that you're racing at. For instance, you know, at Poole every week, we use the same sprocket, and it works for us every week. Well, you know, hopefully you score a few more points, but, you know, we would make the changes in the carburetor and in the ignition, and normally leave the sprocket, you know, the one we put on is the one we would normally race all night. That does determine the speed of the bike and obviously the length of the track. So a few people would maybe make 1 or 2 changes, but you don't normally change the sprocket too often. Well, we don't anyway, and it seems to work for us.
Well, we're certainly building up a picture now of how complicated it is to set up a speedway machine, and I hope that people really appreciate that it isn't just a case that you buy an engine, you put it in a bike and off you go racing. It's very, very different to that, and it changes all night. Certainly on the track, I've noticed there's often a time when a mechanic will come out to the rider and I'll make an adjustment to the clutch. What's that about? Because it's often very last minute.
Yes, it is. They'll probably go out and they'll do a couple of practice starts, and they'll get the feel of the clutch. Now, if it's standing the bike up as soon as they drop the clutch, they'll tend to come back in and they'll weaken the springs off. And what that does, it doesn't make it so hard when they drop the clutch. Instead of it banging and standing up, it will just give it that bit more of a feel as they take off, you know. Or if they go out and they drop the clutch and it just absolutely does nothing, they'll come back in and we'll just turn these in a little bit. You know, we'll just spin them up, make them a bit tighter, so it gives them that bit more of a bang. And just finding the combination of being really hard and just perfect, that's what they're trying to find when they go out to play with the clutches.
It's also very important that the clutches are kept clear, kept cool, and we see that time and time again. Obviously, if there's a restart, mechanics appear, and they've got one of these machines, and that's just a cooler, is it?
Yes, all that does is, you know, if they do 2 or 3 starts, the clutches do get very, very hot, and you want to keep them as cool as you can. So we'll just go out with one of these. It's just basically a fan run by a car battery, and this one is broken at the minute, so I can't show you it working, but you just put that up to there. You'll pull the clutch in, which separates the plates. You'll put that on there for 2 or 3 minutes, and that'll cool the clutch right down, ready for the next race.
Chris, thank you very much indeed for giving us an insight. It's certainly been an insight to me, and I know that our viewers will certainly have gained a lot from it. For me, I think, you know, Speedway is such a physical sport, and what's incredible about setting up a bike is that it relies on such an infinite detail and so much, you know, just fine-tuning. And yet, you know, we see them out there going hell for leather, and that really has been a learning curve for me.
It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
Well, we're about to go trackside again with the Pirates as they take on their next meeting in the series. I'm sure that we'll all be looking at the Pirates with perhaps a different eye now that we've seen what it takes to get one of these things going.